willing to fight back? I mean, I think you've demonstrated that, right?
I think we did it together when we were attorneys general as well.
Yeah, your client is the people, and it's your job to fight for them, because in these jobs, especially even a local prosecutor, I think is even more appropriate scenario. There's only one local prosecutor. There's only one prosecutor in that county. So it's interesting when we have these discussions about some of these prosecutors across the country, and Senator Hawley and I know there's been a couple in Missouri, and they're all around. When they decide not to charge violent criminals, there's nobody else who can do that. There's nobody else that can do that. One of the things that when I was Attorney General we were able to do when President Trump was in office, sadly the Biden administration dropped this effort, was we had assistant AGs deputized as assistant U.S. attorneys to help fight violent crime, to add capacity. And when, you know, there was a surge to take on some of the most violent criminals on the streets, we were there to help. Those are the kind of partnerships I'm guessing that you'll look towards, right? To get back to the core mission of taking on violent crime and fighting for the little guy. So I wanted to give you a little bit of an opportunity to talk about that. And also, sort of, what's your vision? You're answering a lot of questions. What's your vision for the department? I mean, how do you see your role? How do you want to go do that? I think you're incredibly qualified to do it, but just in your own words, what are the things that you're going to focus on?
You know, Senator, it's truly overwhelming when you look at the volume of that department. The Department of Justice, it is the largest law firm in the world and manages the largest law enforcement agencies. And that's why, first and foremost, what I did when I was Attorney General, you surround yourself with great people. And that includes Gail Slater, that includes my Chief of Staff, if I am confirmed, my deputy, and so on and so on, and work from there, but look at each and every department. And I don't know if one department is more important than the other, but I will work very hard every day. And as Senator Welsh had said, it's not only fighting crime. I think that's just first and foremost on Americans' minds right now. But that's why there is an entire huge civil division that falls under the Department of Justice to protect consumers, to do the antitrust cases, to do all the Medicare cases, to do all of the other cases. So it's multifaceted. But first and foremost, of course, to keep America safe and restore integrity to that department. I don't think I can stress enough that 72% of Americans have lost faith in the Department of Justice.
Yeah, and I think that the belief that the American people need to have, again, is that people are going to be treated the same. As you said earlier, there's only one tier. There's not two tiers of justice. And I think that's, when you really dig down to some of the comments you've heard and questions, on, at least on this side, that's the big concern. I don't want it tilted in anybody's direction. You just want it to be fair. And you want certainly the top law enforcement official in the country to view it that way. I think you do. And I think your history, your qualifications, your demeanor, your character warrant a bipartisan vote. I hope you get it. I really do. You deserve it.
Thank you, Senator.
Senator Blumenthal.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Again, thank you, Ms. Bondi, for answering our question. I want to come back to TikTok. And we ran out of time when I was asking you before about the importance of the law that was passed overwhelmingly bipartisan majority here in the United States Congress. As you know, last year, a Chinese hacking group, it was called Salt Typhoon, broke into several American phone companies, reportedly used that access to spy on the White House, the FBI, other sensitive government targets. The threat of Chinese communist espionage goes beyond just watching. It also involved potentially shutting down our grids, other critical infrastructure targets. I assume you agree with me that Chinese cyber warfare, espionage, malign influence is an existential threat to America.
It is an existential threat, Senator, and also I have not seen it yet, but from what I've heard about former FBI Director Wray's comments on 60 Minutes regarding China, sleeper cells within our own country, infiltrating our water systems, our natural gas lines, telecommunications, a very, very real threat to our country.
I'm glad that we agree, and as you know, And as the Department of Justice has noted, it's not classified, so we can talk about it openly. The ByteDance is beholden to the demands of the Chinese government. It is controlled by the Chinese government, and it in turn controls TikTok. Do you agree that ByteDance's control, ownership, exploitation of TikTok is a threat to American national security?
Senator, this is pending litigation within the Department of Justice.
Okay,
and-
let me put it
and
a different way.
I can't talk
It's not
about that at
pending
all.
litigation within the Department of Justice. It's in the courts.
In the courts.
And the Department of Justice is currently defending
Yes.
the constitutionality of American law. Will you
Pending.
continue to defend the law passed by the Congress defending America's national security?
Senator, I cannot, it would be irresponsible for me to talk about anything, and it is pending litigation.
you
We
know,
can talk
I was
semantics
Attorney
all day
General,
long.
and very
I'm not
often-
trying to hedge on anything, Senator.
Oh,
I
I'm
just
having
can't
a
comment on
problem
any.
with the idea that you won't tell me that the Department of Justice will continue to defend against constitutional attacks the law of the United States. When I was Attorney General of the state of Connecticut, I would say I have an obligation to defend the law of Connecticut against any attacks. You have an obligation, or you did as Attorney General of Florida, to go to court when those laws were attacked. You have an obligation as United States Attorney General to do what this Attorney General is doing, whether you agree with it or not, and frankly, whatever the president thinks about that law, you have an obligation to defend it. This is an easy question for you. Will you defend laws of the United States of America against constitutional attacks? I'm asking you in general.
In general, yes.
And with respect to the law that would require divestiture of TikTok, which is a law passed by this body and supported by, I think, a majority of members on both sides of the aisle, why can't you tell us that you will defend it?
Senator, I'm not hedging. This is all pending litigation, and I can't talk about pending litigation if confirmed as Attorney General.
I have to tell you, with all due respect, that answer is unacceptable to me. Thank you.
Thank you.
Before I go to Senator Brett, I'd like to enter a letter into the record from former Department of Justice employees who support Ms. Bondi's nomination. This bipartisan group of attorneys includes several former AGs, assistant attorneys general, U.S. attorneys, right to share both strong and enthusiastic support, unquote, for Ms. Bondi and attest to their, quote, integrity, her integrity and devotion to the rule of law, end of quote. Without objection, I would enter these into the record. Hearing none, so ordered. Senator Brett.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Several of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle have insinuated that your friendship with Donald Trump is a problem. My colleagues on my side of the aisle have leaned into this, kind of exposing the hypocrisy, given what we have seen before from previous administrations. And I would just like to read something to you from 1961. Washington, January 13th. The Senate Judiciary Committee approved without objection today President-elect John F. Kennedy's selection of his brother, Robert, as Attorney General. The vote came after a 2-hour hearing. Would you like a 2-hour hearing, by the way?
Can we redo this?
Yeah, that's right. The vote came after a 2-hour hearing devoted in large part to the praise of Mr. Kennedy. Forecasts that there would be several critical questionings, especially from Republicans, proved incorrect. All 14 committee members present voted to approve the nomination when it was formally made. The New York Times. As it said, blood is thicker than water, meaning family bonds are stronger than any other relationship. I just think that that needs to be before the American people once again, and I appreciate you continuing to reiterate that you will serve the people of this great country and that you will follow the law.
Thank you, Senator.
I'd like to move to something that has become another theme of this hearing, and that is Senator Grassley's letters. So I myself sent a letter to our current Attorney General and unfortunately received the very same treatment. So in front of this committee, Merrick Garland, Attorney General Garland, had made a testimony that we found evidence to possibly contradict what he had said. On March 23rd, he came in front of the Appropriations Committee, where I was a member, and I presented him with evidence that the DOJ had actively discouraged the enforcement of 18 United States Code Section 1507 at the homes of Supreme Court justices in the wake of the leak of the Dobbs decision. Evidence that appeared that he had clearly either misled or misinformed this committee. Evidence that showed that the department was putting politics above duty. Section 1507, as you well know, makes it illegal to picket or parade near a judge's residence and with the intent of influencing them in the discharge of their duty. It was openly and flagrantly violated on numerous occasions in the summer of 2022, yet never enforced by U.S. Marshals stationed at the home of the justices, in large part because of the evidence that we showed that they had been actively discouraged from making arrests. When we asked Attorney General Garland why no one had been prosecuted, he said because no one had been arrested. Really going back to the fact that the U.S. Marshals in these slides were actively discouraged from making them. On May 3rd, 2023, I led a group of senators, many on this committee, sending a letter to the Attorney General asking him for a response to 19 questions by the end of May. And to this day, I have yet to receive any actual response to any of my questions. To Senator Grassley's second point, if you do get a response, which mine came almost a year late, it was just words on paper. And so what I'd like to know from you is two things. One, if confirmed, will you do everything in your power to have yourself or one of your top officials respond in a timely manner to those of us on this committee? And second, since I am almost out of time, will you commit to working to help me get answers about why this happened in the Department of Justice so that we can ensure that it never happens again?
Yes, Senator, and it sounds like we're going to have to open an entire unit to handle Senator Grassley's letters
Good.
to respond to them.
That's what we all like to hear.
Senator Booker.
Thank you, and I'm grateful to Senator Britt for bringing that up. It's probably one of the bill's bipartisan commitments if we're going to fulfill our duties as of the Constitution to give oversight. It's really important that we get timely responses, and I'm grateful for that. I want to jump back right in where we were talking in last, is just about the crack and powder cocaine disparities that we discussed in my office. It's something that this committee in a bipartisan way have done a lot on. We discussed about the 18-to-1 sentencing disparity, which came down from 100-to-1. I've been working in good faith with people like Senator Grassley on trying to just get justice with that, move it as much towards 1-to-1 as possible. We know that actually in Florida, your home state, as well as 43 other states, it's
1-to-1.
It's 1-to-1. Thank you for making my question quicker. Will you commit to continuing the DOJ 2002 policy of just enforcing it as if it was 1-to-1?
Yeah, and I will look at that policy if I am confirmed as Attorney General. I had no idea it was 18-to-1. That I will look at that policy if confirmed and report back to you right away. It sounds like if I'm confirmed, I have a lot of reporting backs to do right away.
Thank you.
But I will, Senator.
Am I overly
Right.
stating the fact that, reading from your expression, that you seem to think that 18-to-1, especially given what's going on in Florida, seems unreasonable?
I was unaware that that was happening and why you would want it to be 1-to-1.
Right. I know your sincere and heartfelt beliefs on abortion in general, and I respect that and our differences on it. But when it comes to medication abortion, over 2 decades ago, the Food and Drug Administration approved the medication abortion pill mifepristone as safe and effective. Decades of research continue to confirm the drug's safety. However, access to mifepristone was threatened by several lawsuits that second-guess the FDA's expert judgment about the drug. The Department of Justice has vigorously defended the FDA's judgment about the safetiness and effectiveness, and I guess a lot of people are concerned about reversing a policy that could deeply affect people's access to mifepristone. I'm wondering if you would commit to continuing the U.S. Department of Justice's efforts to defend the FDA's judgment in lawsuits against mifepristone.
And I was not aware of that, Senator, until we spoke. And I think I told you I will look at that policy. I was not aware of the policy. I will look at that policy. I am personally pro-life. I have always been pro-life, but I will look at that policy. I will not let my personal beliefs affect how I carry out the
I
law.
wish I had more than 90 seconds to talk to you about an issue, but you've been so willing to talk to me about it. But the First Step Act implementation is, in my opinion, in a dire state. We had a bipartisan bill with 87 senators voting for it, 88 if Lindsey Graham was not off fighting the world's fight. I would like to make sure that you work with us to have implementation done. One of the reasons why it's so poorly implemented is because of the disastrous realities in the Bureau of Prisons. We've had bipartisan hearings here about the egregious stuff. The hearing was so disturbing that one of my colleagues on the other side came over and said, whatever I can do, let's work together. It is understaffed, and therefore a lot of the people that are supposed to be implementing the programs that would help for people to earn time credit to get out, the education programs that are proven to reduce recidivism, can't be done because the Bureau of Prisons is a disaster in terms of staffing and funding. People leave their federal correctional officers' jobs to go to state because they can make significantly more money. Is this a cause?
Morale is horrible.
Yes, morale is horrible. Do you feel a sense of urgency like I do to focus on the Bureau of Prisons, to deal with the staffing issues and help for the full implementation of the First Step Act?
Yes, Senator, and yes, and I spoke about that, I think, when you were in another committee hearing, but yes, I will, of course.
Thank you for the latitude, Mr. Chairman.
For a question for both the nominee and you, Senator Booker. You were talking about this one-to-one equation. If your implication to her was that it could be done through her actions, then it seems we've been wasting our time trying to find a compromise between you and me on that subject for legislation.
I didn't prepare for this hearing, sir. I didn't know I'd be asked questions. I look forward to working with you. I do believe that it should be done judicially as well as with prosecutorial discretion.
Okay.
It should be done legislatively as well as prosecutorial discretion. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. General Bondi, I congratulate you on an excellent job at this hearing. And I want to go back to the topic you and I discussed before, which is the politicization of the Department of Justice. I want to focus on a different aspect of it. We talked about the Department of Justice under Joe Biden and Kamala Harris being used to target the president's political enemies. We talked about it being used to protect the political friends and allies of the White House. But there's another aspect of politicization and lawlessness, and that is refusing to follow the law, utterly defying federal statutory law. And I think there's no area where this has been more egregious than as it concerns our immigration laws. We have had 4 years of a wide open southern border. My state, Texas, has borne a disproportionate burden as a consequence of that, as 12 million illegal aliens have flooded into this country. And what the Biden administration has done, no other president in the history of America has done. The Biden administration has simply ignored the law, and when illegal aliens are apprehended, they release them. Federal law says they shall be detained, says they shall be deported. And frankly, our constitutional system is not meant to deal with a president who defies the law. Article 2 says the president shall take care that the laws be faithfully executed. This administration utterly defied the law. I have said somewhat tongue-in-cheek, Joe Biden did something I previously thought was impossible. He made me miss Barack Obama. Because Barack Obama, for all my disagreements with him, when it came to illegal immigration, he by and large followed the law. Barack Obama deported millions of people. The left got mad at him and called him the deporter-in-chief. No administration has ever done what this administration has done, which has said, we are going to facilitate the invasion of this country. We're going to release 12 million people, and we are going to see Americans murdered, women raped, children abused and murdered. We're going to see drugs flood into this country, fentanyl flood into this country. And so I want to ask you several things on this. First of all, in your experience, what are the consequences of open borders, and who pays the price when illegal immigrants, and in particular violent criminal illegal immigrants, are released into the country?
American citizens, Senator, and I think I know they're paying the price every single day. We're seeing it, we're watching it. We've talked about Lake and Riley, of course, multiple times, but there are multiple victims, violent crime in all of our states. And as we say now, every state is a border state. I was at the border, not in your state, but in Yuma, Arizona, several months ago, and I saw firsthand, the Border Patrol agents and Customs showed us IDs and driver's license, Venezuela, from all of these countries, IDs just thrown on the ground, and people were allowed to walk freely into our country. Senator, I never knew the definition of a disposable child. I never heard that term in my entire career until I was there. A disposable child, the agents kept recognizing a little boy coming over and over. You're familiar with it, I'm sure. Same little boy.
And let me ask, just because
and he had been trafficked.
Let me ask, because my time has expired and the issue you're raising is so incredibly important. One statistic that every American should know is the number 300,000. There are over 300,000 children that this administration has lost. Little girls and little boys who came here unaccompanied were in this administration's custody. They handed them over to adults, many of them not blood relatives, and they don't know where they are. I've never seen a single Democrat in this committee ask one question about the 300,000 children. I want to ask you a commitment. Will you, as Attorney General, investigate and make every effort to find those children, and if they are subject to abuse, get them out of those abusive situations that the federal government has put them into?
Yes, Senator.
Thank you.
Senator Padilla.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I'll just follow up Senator Cruz's final comment with suggesting that we include targeting those children who are victims of unscrupulous employers as well. And happy to follow up with articles and reports as you prepare for this position.
Senator, I'm sorry, employers?
Yes.
Okay, I didn't understand that.
Yeah, many employers across the country who are employing and exploiting dangerous conditions.
Yes.
These children that we're talking about. Ms. Bondi, we have even less time in this round than the first round.
Oh, darn.
And I don't have some yes or no questions, but a couple of important issues I do want to make sure to cover for the record. When you were a Florida Attorney General, you defended restrictive abortion laws, including mandatory waiting periods and parental consent requirements. If confirmed as Attorney General, would you advocate for similar restrictions at the federal level?
I will follow the law of the United States of America.
Okay, well, I'm asking this question because there's a difference between federal law and Florida law. There's a difference between the law and your personal views. So how
And according
would you
to
ensure,
Dobbs, those are left to the states.
how would you ensure that your personal views don't influence your decisions as Attorney General in cases involving reproductive health?
Oh, my personal, no, my personal feelings would not influence, Senator.
Okay. Next, questions on the topic of gun violence, which continues to be a challenge and a problem in many parts of the country. As you know, the Department of Justice plays a key role in enforcing federal gun laws and working to prevent gun violence. In the wake of the Parkland shooting in 2018, you expressed support for certain gun control measures in Florida, including raising the minimum age for firearm purchases and implementing red flag laws, which I agree with, I support, and they're proven to make a difference and to save lives. How would you use the position of Attorney General to advance these common sense gun safety policies on a national level?
First, Senator, let me say I am pro-Second Amendment. I have always been pro-Second Amendment. I will follow the laws of my state of Florida and our country, of course, regarding any gun laws. I worked that shooting, meaning I was there when 17 family members were notified, I was there, that their children were murdered. Also Pulse nightclub. I also went to Nevada to help with the MGM shooting. The Attorney General at the time asked me to come out there. I believe over 60 people were murdered there. I am an advocate for the Second Amendment, but I will enforce the laws of the land.
Okay, well, I appreciate that. I would certainly hope so. But any specific ideas that you have on advancing the common sense gun safety proposals that you support as you were Attorney General? I gave you 2 examples: raising the minimum age for firearm purchases or implementing red flag laws. There's, I think, a growing national consensus on universal background checks.
I would be glad to meet with you and review any legislation that you have, Senator.
Okay. All right, I only have a few seconds left, but thank you for your testimony. I know we asked some tough questions in this hearing. That's what the confirmation hearing process is supposed to be about. I know how to count, and I know how to read tea leaves. It seems to me you're very, 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 very likely to be confirmed, and certainly look forward to working with you in your office on the issues that I've raised today and more. And I certainly look forward to seeing you demonstrate the independence and respect for the rule of law that you have suggested to the committee today. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator, and my prayers are with you in California again on the horrific fires and what you're doing.
Thank you very much.
Combat them.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I know you're so pleased that we're about to the end of the day. And we thank you so much for your time and your dedication and your desire to serve. And there are several things that we work together on here in this committee, and we will need your help. Online privacy, we have never addressed. Senator Blumenthal and I have worked on that. The Kids Online Safety Act, which we are looking forward to finishing here this under President Trump's leadership so that we can protect children in the virtual space. And another portion of the work that I put a good bit of time into is combating human trafficking. And I know you have such a background in that, and we are so appreciative that you bring that background to the AG's position, because this is an issue that has languished. Now, Senator Cruz mentioned the 300,000 children that are not accounted for nearly 2 years ago. I wrote the HHS secretary. It was at about 100, it was at 75,000 at that point, and the number has increased. And there are steps that could be taken that this administration, the Biden administration, has tossed to the side. We have legislation to address those. But General Bondi, this is something that you can begin to do on day one. This administration has stopped doing fingerprints. They have stopped doing DNA testing. And because of that, we know that about 40% of the kids that come to that border are being trafficked. And there is a way to put an end to this. So we have, we think creating a database, a human trafficking database at DOJ is a good step forward. We do have legislation on that. Another thing that we're working on is having Child Protective Services actually record the interviews with children and adults to help to protect these children. But I would really like to get your commitment on the record for your help and a statement about the work that you have done in human trafficking and your commitment to ending that in our country.
Thank you, Senator, and I have not yet reviewed your legislation, but I would love to review that legislation. Yeah, I learned about the fingerprinting and the DNA when I was at the border a few months ago, and I really couldn't believe that. And while I was there, I went to a rape crisis center, and what I saw and learned at that border, there is nothing humane happening at that border.
No.
And so many women and children are being trafficked coming into this country. And when I was Attorney General for the state of Florida, I went to Mexico and I went to a safe house and I met victims of human trafficking, women and children. I held babies who had been trafficked. And what gets a young drug addicted, because they addict all these women to drugs when they're trafficked, young drug addicted mother to break free from her captor, they were sending her to New York. And when they were going to do that, what did? They were going to kill her baby. And that's what got her to break away and get to a safe house. So I am committed to fighting human trafficking alongside you, and I have not yet read your legislation.
I appreciate that. We appreciate so much your commitment to that. There is nothing compassionate about what is going on at that southern border, and we will need your attention to fix those issues.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
On behalf of the chair, Senator Schiff.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's been suggested, Ms. Bondi, by a number of my colleagues that the concern Democrats have is that you are friends with the president. That's not our concern. It's not our concern that you're loyal to the former president. The president has a right to choose people who he believes will be loyal to him. Our concern comes when that loyalty to the president conflicts with your duty, conflicts with the Constitution, conflicts with your oath. And our questions have been designed to try to ascertain what you will do when that inevitable conflict arises. And you may say that you believe that conflict will never come, but every day, week, month, and year of the first Trump administration demonstrated that conflict will come. Jeff Sessions may not have believed it would come to him, it came to him. Bill Barr may not have believed it would come to him, it came to him. It came to everyone. It will come to you. And what you do in that moment will define your attorney generalship, your public service, everything you've done up to that moment will be judged by what you do in that moment. I would encourage you to talk to Secretary Mattis, someone who had broad respect and has broad respect of Americans on both sides of the aisle, who felt it incumbent on him to leave his post because he could not in good conscience continue to do as he was asked. I would encourage you to talk to Chris Wray, who perhaps, as well as anyone, walked that difficult line, avoiding unnecessary and gratuitous fights with the former president, but at the same time defending his workforce, defending the democracy and our institutions. I would talk to those who have been where you're about to be, because you will surely be faced with that difficult challenge if you are confirmed. Let me turn to some California particular concerns. I'm grateful for your acknowledgement of the trauma we've been through with the fires. That is not over. We will need your help in going after those who are committing arson or who are looting or the inevitable fraudsters who will take advantage of the situation to try to defraud taxpayers.
Price gouging.
As well as price gouging. Indeed, on the subject of price gouging, and we talked quite a bit about the 2020 election, the 2024 election was about the high cost of living. I hope you will demonstrate a willingness to go after anyone who's engaged in price gouging. I think the oil companies are engaged in price gouging. The price at the pump in California is through the roof. Are you willing to take on even powerful interests like the oil industry if you determine that they are gouging consumers?
I handled the BP oil spill, Senator, when I was Attorney General for the state of Florida. Right now, as an immediate concern, I would be concerned about helping you in California with all the criminal acts that I'm sure are happening throughout your state, with the looting, with and this is just from me watching it on the news. You've been there on the ground, but crime is rampant in California, and it's only going to get worse based on these fires and what happened. And price gouging is when people come in and they try to raise the price of goods, water, essential commodities, when people have lost their homes. And not everyone lives in a big home. Most people don't. and people have lost everything that they have had. And
I'm-
I am committed to working with everyone in California constantly to help the people in the aftermath of these fires and do everything that I can.
We will need your help on that. We will need your help on attacking the scourge of fentanyl. We can't solve this problem as a local government or state government or federal government alone. We need to work together on that. And let me ask one last question, if I may, Mr. Chairman. Important to a great many Californians and people around the country. And that is, will you respect their marriage? Will you respect marriage equality? Will you defend marriage equality?
I will respect the law, absolutely.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator. I'm sitting here in the chairman's seat, General Bondi. It's a great feeling of power.
Do you have documents you want me to review?
Maybe some things I'd like you to sign. Let me just ask you here, and I think I may be your last interlocutor for the day, so congratulations. You've just done fantastic. Thank you for answering all of our questions. Let me just ask you about another of the abuses that this past administration perpetrated that is still in place, and I'm referring to the October 2021 memo from Attorney General Garland targeting parents at school board meetings. Do you remember this?
Yes, Senator.
What happened was, as I'm sure you recall, we now know the Biden administration, the White House, the Secretary of Education solicited a letter from the National School Board Association. They ginned it up. It was fake from beginning to end. They ginned it up, calling for law enforcement scrutiny against parents, tax-paying parents who are going to school board meetings, inquiring what their children were being taught, inquiring about face masks, critical race theory, and Attorney General Garland. You talk about bowing to political pressure. When the White House demanded he activate the FBI against these parents, amazingly, unbelievably, he did it. And he issued this memorandum in October of 2021. All of this time later, that memorandum has still never been formally rescinded. Even after the National School Board Association withdrew their letter, admitted they had been wrong to call parents potential domestic terrorists who were merely raising questions about what their children were being taught, Garland never apologized for it. He never did anything about it. It is still in effect. Here's my question for you. As Attorney General, if and when you are confirmed, will you finally rescind that memorandum and do right on behalf of all of these parents who have been wrongly, unjustly targeted by the FBI and DOJ?
Senator, I have not yet read the memo. If I am confirmed, I will read the memo and I will do the right thing, just like I told senators on both sides of the aisle regarding their issues.
Good. I look forward to you doing that, and I would hope this is something you could do on the first day after you're confirmed, to send a message to parents and law-abiding citizens everywhere. This shouldn't be a partisan issue. I bet the parents who went to these meetings, they're Republicans or Democrats, they have no partisanship, but they want to know that their First Amendment rights will be protected. And you rescinding that memo formally after, frankly, the current Attorney General lied to us about it for years would send a tremendous message. Let me just ask you about the one other thing, and this is something near and dear to me. We talked about this when you came to my office. The Department of Justice administers a fund called the Radiation Exposure Compensation Fund. This is a fund that helps pay for the health care bills of Americans who have been exposed to nuclear radiation by the government through no fault of their own. In the West and other parts of the country, the Department of Justice has administered that program for years. Senator Orrin Hatch actually wrote the initial bill. It has been in existence since 1990. It's been supported by senators from both parties. It's extremely important to my state because the state of Missouri, we have a lot of nuclear radiation that has occurred, that's still in our groundwater, still in our soil, not cleaned up yet. My question for you is, since you'll be in charge of administering it, will you administer that program fairly and equitably? Will you defend it? Will you make sure that radiation victims who are under the statute entitled to compensation from their government get what they deserve?
Senator, I was speaking about that with someone yesterday because I did not know, again, there's going to be a lot, if I am confirmed, that I don't know. That's why it's so important to keep an open dialogue with every senator from every state. And yes, I am committed to looking at that. And I did not realize you had that horrific problem in your state.
Thank you very much. Thank you for answering our questions. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back my time.
Before I close down this meeting, I would enter into a record from a bipartisan group of attorneys who have served as Attorney General in their respective states. This includes New York, Delaware, New Jersey, Illinois, and Hawaii. They write that Ms. Bondi has worked, quote, across both state and party lines to solve problems. And a further quote, that she is, quote unquote, highly qualified nominee. Without objection, that will be put in the record. You've done extremely well. I thank you for your testimony today, and I thank your family, whatever pressures they felt. We apologize for it, but thank you for being so patient through all this process. You should be very proud, Ms. Bondi. You performed well, I think, admirably is another adjective, and showed this entire country that you're eminently qualified to serve as Attorney General. If confirmed, you will be a chief protector of the rule of law, and I have every confidence that you're going to do a superb job. Now, for information for the future, written questions can be submitted for the record until tomorrow at 5 p.m. Ms. Bondi, when you receive these questions, please enter and return them to the committee as soon as possible, because under our rules, that has something to do with when we can schedule action for your confirmation. You're excused at this point. This committee is adjourned. We will reconvene tomorrow right here. Is it right here in this room? Right here at 10:15 a.m. to hear from a panel of outside witnesses in regard to Ms. Bondi's nomination. We adjourn.
Thank you, Senator.
press briefing will begin in 2 minutes. The press briefing will begin in 2 minutes. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon. Hi, Corinne. Hi. I haven't seen you in a while. This is a good day. You all have just heard the terrific news from the president that after 15 months of war, Israel and Hamas have reached a ceasefire and hostage deal. This deal will halt the fighting in Gaza, surge much-needed humanitarian assistance to Palestinian civilians who have been living in dire conditions, and it will reunite the hostages, including Americans, with their families after more than 15 months in captivity, experiencing unimaginable suffering. Over the past few days, President Biden spoke with the leaders of Israel, Qatar, and Egypt to continue to push negotiations forward and reach the resolution we announced today. The process has been steered out of the West Wing at the direction of the President by National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan and driven to completion through relentless diplomacy by Middle East Coordinator Brett McGurk, who has been actively negotiating day and night in Doha. I will note that Brett is currently in meetings with foreign leaders, and when he emerges, the National Security Council is going to host a background call to answer more of your questions. Secretary Blinken, Director Burns have traveled regularly to the region in recent months and throughout the past year and been in close touch with the key players in the region to advance negotiations forward. President Biden has also directed his team to work closely with the incoming administration to ensure all spoke with one voice on the need to secure a deal. As the president said, we have reached this point because of the pressure Israel has put on Hamas, while with the backing of the United States. Sinwar was killed. Iran's attacks against Israel failed thanks to the support from the United States. We have built a coalition of nations to defend against Houthi attacks. We negotiated a ceasefire after Hezbollah was significantly weakened, and Iran is weaker today than it has been in decades. These developments, which the United States helped shape, have created new conditions in the region, conditions that have led to the outcome we are seeing today. Today, even as we welcome this news, we remember all of the families whose loved ones were killed in Hamas's horrific October 7th attack, and the many innocent people who have been killed in the war that followed. It is long time for the fighting to end and the work of building peace and security to begin. The families of the American hostages are at the forefront of our hearts and minds today. They have been through a terrible ordeal that I cannot begin to imagine. Under this deal, President Biden is determined to finally bring their loved ones home. Now, again, Brett McGurk is the best equipped to answer the specific implementation questions, as he has been directly involved in extensive negotiations, obviously on the ground. In the meantime, we wanted to come out here to speak to the news and also answer any other questions that you may all have. But before I even move forward to taking your questions, I want to do one of those, as a former senator, now President Biden would say, a point of personal privilege here. Today is the 537th briefing of the Biden-Harris administration. This is my 306th briefing and the final briefing of the administration. Before I get to all your questions, I just want to say a few things and also just give out a few thank yous, if that's okay. So we had the first briefing of this administration on Inauguration Day because President Joe Biden wanted to make clear the importance of daily press briefings and the vital role that the press plays in our democracy. President Biden believed in returning the norm of regular briefings and communicating to all of you and the American people about what we are doing and why it was important. The President and all of us in this administration understand that a free press is a cornerstone of our nation, and that the job you do questioning leaders and holding the powerful accountable is important. And as I said during my first briefing when I took over this role, we might not see eye to eye here in this room all of the time, and that is okay. The give and take that happens here is incredibly healthy, and it is part of our democracy. I have been honored to partake in it with all of you. Well, most of the time I've been honored to take it. But in all seriousness, I also said at the first briefing, I would not be here today if it were not for generations of barrier-breaking people before me. I have stood on their shoulders. I benefit from their sacrifices. I have learned excellence, and I am eternally grateful to them. And now I will pass the torch. It is my sincere hope that while I may be the first for many things at this podium, behind this lectern, I am not the last. I hope my presence at this podium has served as inspiration to many young girls out there who look at me and look at this job and look at what we've been able to do and have a similar background as me. And hopefully they can follow their dreams and never give up and know that you can achieve great things if you put your heart and mind and be passionate about it, no matter how many barriers you may need to overcome. Progress is not always a straight line, but we all must do our part. In the words of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., whose birthday is indeed today, bend it towards justice and pay it forward. I hope that, and I and many barrier-breaking colleagues in this administration have played a small role in doing just that. Standing here and having served in this role for this administration and this president has truly been the honor of a lifetime, one I am grateful for and I will never forget. But it is a job I could never have done alone. And so finally, I do want to say a few thank yous to a few people in this room that I've gotten the pleasure to work with. I want to start off by thanking the best team in the business: Emily, Andrew, Kelly, Robin, Angelo, Jeremy, Sonia, Chloe, Jacob, Chris. You are simply the best. And thank you so much for having my back and doing this job and having the president's back and doing it so well. Truly the best. You work tirelessly, passionately, and with utmost professionalism. You serve the president and this nation well. I am proud to call you all my friends and colleagues. None of this would be possible without all of you. I also want to acknowledge some of the former team members who are with us today. They're spread about here in the back. And you know, as you all know, many of them left to continue to do some impressive work outside and obviously continue to do some work within the administration. Chris Vedant is here as well, who just had a baby girl. Congratulations, Vedant. I had to call you out for that, which is wonderful. You and your wife brought in a beautiful little girl. Alexandra, Silas, Allison, Angela, Natalie. It is all good to see you, and thank you for all that you have done. Thank you for your service. And Jen Psaki, who's in the back, thank you so much. I see you, and I am so grateful that you took the time to be here. And so thank you for your kindness, thank you for your friendship, and we've missed you around here, and it's so good to see your face. I also want to thank my parents. Growing up as an immigrant family in New York, they never imagined their daughter would be standing here today. They worked day and night to give me every opportunity possible. I can't thank them enough, and to my parents, sorry I didn't become a doctor, but hopefully this is okay. And to my lovely, amazing daughter, you have gone too many nights without me being around, and without me being there for school drop-offs, and without your mama around. And I can't wait to spend more time with you. I call her my pudding, so I can't wait to spend more time with you, Pudding. Thank you for your love and support and your patience. And finally, I do want to say thank you to President Biden and First Lady Dr. Biden for this incredible opportunity. As I said earlier, standing at this podium behind this lectern, serving the American people and this administration has been an honor of a lifetime. And I will be forever grateful to the President for his trust and this amazing opportunity. And with that, thank you for your patience all. I appreciate that. With that, Zeke.
Thanks, Corinne. When will the American hostages who are being held by Hamas be released? Will they be released in phase one, or will that come in subsequent phases?
And so the president answered this a little bit when he was speaking earlier today. He mentioned phase one. That's when we're going to be seeing that. And
the American hostages will come out in phase
so there will be more details that Brett McGurk will share right after this briefing. But what I will say is just to give you a little bit of how it will work. So during the first phase, which will begin on Sunday, the fighting will stop. Hostages will begin to be released, and aid will surge into Gaza. During these weeks, the second phase of the deal will continue to be negotiated to bring a permanent end to this war. If negotiations take longer than 6 weeks, the ceasefire will continue to hold as long as negotiations continue. This deal was developed by the president and his team about 8 months ago, back in May. You heard the president talk about that. So this was the framework. And once he was able to put out the framework, it was endorsed by the world. And so we are certainly, as the president started off in his remarks to the American people, to all of you as well, this is a good day. This is a good day. This is a good step forward. And so Brett McGurk, after this briefing, will have a call to give more details of how this is going to move forward. But again, this is a very good step forward.
And then, as we mentioned, the president announced this framework back in May of last year, a deal has been reached 5 days before this administration's term ends. It will go into effect a day before the next president is sworn in. is it clear, does the president want to give some credit to his successor and that there's a forcing mechanism by that transition as helping push this bill towards the
So a couple of
finish line?
things, and you said this in your question to me. This is a framework that the president put forth about 8 months ago, back in May. Again, it was endorsed by the world when he put out this framework. His team has worked, because of the direction of the president, obviously, has worked 24/7, night and day to get this done. You're going to hear directly from Brett McGurk, who's been on the ground, who's been in Doha at the direction of the president, obviously, with the leadership of National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan. And what we see this day as, this is a good day. This is a good day. Hostages are going to be able to go home, including American hostages, to their families. And after, 15 months since Hamas did something so unimaginable, launched an attack that was so dreadful. We lost so many lives because of that attack on October 7th, and we have been working around the clock to get this done. And so that's how we look at it. We're going to continue. We're going to continue to speak with the Trump transition. You heard even from National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan on Monday talk about how they have been coordinating with the Trump team, keeping them abreast, having regular conversations with them about this. And now we understand that this is going to be implemented by the next team, and so we're going to continue to work with until January 20th, we're going to continue to work closely with the Trump transition team. We have to remember what we have seen from this president over the last 8 months, since 15 months, as we're talking about this particular matter. That's what American president does. That's what they do. And that's what we've seen from this president and his leadership.
And you mentioned that this deal will be implemented by the next president. There's coordination between the White House and the incoming administration. Has the president spoken at all with his successor? And outside of the very brief ceremonial tea that they will have on the morning of the 20th, does he plan on having a more substantive conversation with him about his strategy and the briefing and the relationships that went into this agreement?
Well, Zeke, I will remind you, when he invited the President-elect Trump to the White House, they met for more than 90 minutes. And that's a pretty long time, significant time to have a heart-to-heart, a bit of a conversation. So that happened, as you know, right after the election. I don't have anything to read out at this time of upcoming conversation or conversations that's happened since their meeting in the Oval Office. But again, the Trump transition team and our team have been in constant communication, having these conversations, keeping them abreast. This president made a commitment. He made a commitment that he wanted to see a peaceful transfer of power, something that he didn't get 4 years ago. But he wanted to make sure to continue that tradition and do a peaceful transfer of power. That's what you have seen. He wanted to make sure the transition was effective, efficient, and that's what we have provided. And like I said, we're going to be in close touch with our team and their team in the next couple of days.
And just lastly, on a different topic, you've said the president has been weighing preemptive pardons for all sorts of officials who he fears may be targeted by the incoming administration. Has he made a decision? And given that this is the last briefing, if he were to decide to issue those pardons, could you commit now that there'll be an opportunity to ask questions of the outgoing administration before noon on the 20th about any of the presidential actions?
I don't have anything to announce. You are correct. You could expect more pardons. I'm not going to go into details of what that's going to look like. It is not unusual for a president to do that. And so you should expect that from this president. I'm not going to make any commitments right now. I'm not going to lock ourselves into a potential another opportunity to ask questions about the pardons. But what I can say is stay tuned, and there'll be more to share. And I'm sure the president's going to want to continue to engage with all of you in the next couple of days. Okay, Lucia. I haven't seen you in a while. Good to see you.
It's good to see you, and thank you so much for taking our questions so often.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thanks, Lucia.
So, in terms of implementing the terms of this agreement, how confident is President Biden that the incoming administration will do that, and have they offered any assurances that they will carry them out?
I think there's a commitment to move forward with this deal. I think there's a commitment to make sure that there's an end to this war. Obviously, hostages are going to be coming home. Obviously, we've been in very close touch with the Trump transition. And the president was asked some variation of that question moments ago after he spoke, and he said he is very much indeed confident. So look, we understand this is going to be implemented by the next team, as I just stated. We are going to work closely in close coordination with the Trump team. As the president has said, and I have said also moments ago, we want this to be in one voice, right? I think that's what you have seen in the past couple of weeks, how we have moved forward in one voice. And this is what's important for the hostages, to get them home, to make sure that we're getting that humanitarian aid into Gaza, and to ending this war that has taken a lot of innocent lives. And so that is the commitment. That is the commitment that you can see from us, and that's what the president believes, that he is confident in how we're going to move forward.
Tonight, President Biden is going to be delivering a farewell address. Ahead of that speech, we got a long list of what he views as his greatest accomplishments.
Yeah. Over 100 pages, I believe, right? Did you read? Did you have every word?
We have every Can you talk about what he thinks his greatest failures are, and whether he will address those tonight to the American public?
So look, this is an important moment for the president. He has been working on the speech, because obviously these are farewell remarks, but he is obviously going to be talking directly to the American people. It is not going to be partisan. This is something that, and not just forget, it's not just about the last 4 years of his administration. He is stepping down from his career, right? More than 50 years of public service that this president has done as senator, as vice president, as president. So you can imagine the president has a lot to say, a lot of thoughts that he wants to share, really touch on the moment that we're in right now. And so that's what you're going to hear from the president. What he wants to do, obviously, is also be positive, talk about what we have been able to do. This is a president that speaks about possibilities and how he sees this country moving forward. And so that's what I could speak to. I'm not going to get ahead of what specifically what the president's going to say. I'm not going to go into line by line, but I can say, and I'd love to say that from here, is stay tuned, and I will leave it there.
And then finally for you, because you've clearly reflected on your role as press secretary, is there anything you wish you had done or said differently during your time?
Well, I will have a lot of time to reflect, right? You're not going to catch me up here, Alicia, today, but I will have a lot of time to reflect on my time here. As you know, this is, and I think you've gotten to know a few press secretaries during your career, this is a job that's nonstop. There's not a lot of time to reflect. It's always, we have to do the job, we have to speak on behalf of the president, we have to make sure that we're communicating with all of you. But what I can say with full heart is that this has been an honor and a privilege to do this job, and I have done it to my best of abilities on behalf of this president, and the best job that I will ever have. I truly believe that.
Thank you.
Okay, Mary.
Thank you, Corinne. You and the president have stressed that this is the framework that he put forward last spring, but the president also made clear it was important to him to work with the incoming administration, that they be speaking in as one team, as he put it. Even the Qatari prime minister in his remarks personally thanked Steve Witkoff, the incoming administration's Middle East envoy. So do Donald Trump and his team deserve any credit for this?
I mean, look, everyone is going to want some credit. Everybody's going to want some credit. Get that? That's how this goes when something good happens. Not unusual. It is not unusual at all. What I can say is the president got it done, right? That's what I can say. And what I could also say is that, and you said it in your question to me, is that there was a framework that was put forward, and it was put forward by the president back in May 31st of last year, and it was endorsed by the world. And you see a president that has done everything that he can. This is someone who has foreign policy experience, decades of foreign policy experience. He understands what it means to bring people together. He understands what it means to get a deal done. He also said in his remarks how difficult it was to negotiate. Negotiating is incredibly hard, and this wasn't easy, but we got it done. And so this is someone who speaks from experience, and this is, again, not an easy thing to get done. But as we've said, and I've said multiple times, and I think Jake Sullivan said this obviously recently when he was here on Monday, we were able to work closely with the Trump transition team and coordinate with them. But again, this is a framework that the president put out, and negotiations aren't easy. And this was one of the toughest negotiations that he experienced. And this is something that the president shared with all of you.
And does the president have any plans to talk to the families of the hostages, or has he talked to them today?
So as you know, the president and this administration has been in regular touch with the hostages hostage family, and have obviously always communicated with them that how much we're with them and the work, everything that we're doing to try to bring their loved one home. And we have stayed in constant communication with them. I don't have anything to read out as a call to any of the American hostages or the families at this time, but I can say that the president is, as he said, this is a really good afternoon, and our hearts go out. Our hearts go out to the families who have been waiting 15 months to get their loved ones home. And so this is a big deal. This is a big deal.
And just on a slightly more personal note, on this, your 306th briefing, what advice do you have for your successor?
So I was asked this question, I think, when my successor was announced, and it's pretty much the same, which is, obviously I wish her the best of luck. This is a great job, an amazing opportunity to be standing at this podium behind this lectern and to go back and forth with all of you and speak on behalf of this president, the president of the United States. There's nothing like it. And I hope she enjoys the job. I hope she continues to do this, what we've been doing for the past almost 4 years. And I truly wish her well.
The decision the president made to include Steve Witkoff, how did that come about?
Look, that is, I'm not going to...
Why did the president do it?
Well, look, this goes back to what the president said right after the election. A peaceful transfer of power. Again, something that he didn't get 4 years ago. And wanting to make sure that we had an effective, efficient transition. That's what it looks like. The president is basically leading by example. That's what he's doing. This is a president who understands norms, who understands institutions, and understands how important that is. And he wanted to respect the outcome of the election, the will of the people. And that is what you've seen this president do.
At any point did the president think maybe this deal will not be reached on his watch?
The president was hopeful. He was optimistic. This is, as you know, I think you know this, Steve, this is a president that tends to be optimistic and hopeful, but not just that, does the work, leans in, has the experience to get things done, which is what we saw from this president today. I think this is a great example of that. And, he never gave up hope. Never gave up hope. And to your point, until the last minute, and we were able to get this done.
Thank you, Karine. This is the second negotiated pause in fighting between Israel and Hamas. The first, as you know, was reached more than a year ago in November 2023. Fighting then resumed just a few weeks later. So what confidence does the U.S. have that this time will be different?
We're going to have confidence, right? I think it's important, stepping back. Negotiations are hard. They're difficult. This was a difficult one. This took multiple sides to come together. The president, as you know, spoke to Qatar, the leader of Qatar, Egypt, and even Prime Minister Bibi Netanyahu recently. And this is what diplomacy looks like, having those continued conversations, making sure that voices are heard, and having those tough back and forth. And so we have to be, I think it is important to also be confident in that we can continue to get this done. And, Steve just asked me, why did we bring in Witkoff? Why did we bring in the Trump? This is why. Because we know that there has to be a continuation of this. We know that this first phase is about to start. There's going to be a second phase, and it's going to continue. We got to get to a place where this war is done permanently, ends permanently. And so bringing in the Trump administration, coordinating with them, and making sure that they're having the information that we all have. We are hopeful that this will continue.
Under the framework, negotiations for that phase 2 would need to begin within a matter of days after phase 1 begins. What is the White House's view of the commitment of the incoming Trump team and the competency of the Trump team to go through those negotiations and get a phase 2 and beyond?
So I would refer you to the National Security Advisor. Jake Sullivan talked about his relationship and back and forth with his counterpart and how that has gone very well. And so I think that's a good sign of how this is going to certainly move forward. Again, we have been in close coordination with their team, and we're going to continue to do that. We're going to continue to talk through with them on the next steps, and we're going to and what you have seen, really, what you have seen in the past, certainly couple of days, couple of weeks, is one voice coming together in one voice to get this deal done. You know, I think a lot of your questions obviously go to the transition team, and they can certainly answer and speak for themselves. But what we can speak to, what I can speak to, is what we've been doing, what we have actively done for the past couple of weeks to get this done in unison, to get this done in a way that that when the transition happens, we have that confidence that we can move this forward, continue to move this forward.
More light on other officials from the incoming administration that you and your colleagues in the West Wing have been hosting for meetings and conversations, and what those have looked like?
So I can't shed any light on that. What I can say is that we have been working closely with the transition team. We want this to be efficient. We want this to be effective. We are doing this. The president wants to do this on behalf of the American people, and that's what you can count on. I'm not going to list out names of folks who we've been talking to.
And just finally, Karine, a new CNN poll that's out this morning shows that just 36% of U.S. adults say they approve of the way that Biden has handled the presidency. To what do you attribute that?
I mean, look, I've been very careful in talking about polls and not speaking to every poll. I understand this is a CNN poll. What I can speak to is what the president has done to get things done, to get things delivered for the American people. If you think about beating big pharma, if you think about lowering healthcare costs, bringing manufacturing jobs back, or manufacturing back here more broadly. If you think about insulin, capping insulin at $35 a month for seniors, all of those things that I just listed out are very popular with the American people. They are. And that has always been at the forefront of the president's mind. What can he do to deliver for the American people on the needs that they care about? And that's the type of economic policy that he put forward. That's what he wanted to make sure we didn't leave anybody behind. And you know, many communities have felt that they've been left behind. That's why we talk about building an economy from the bottom up, middle out. That's been his focus, and you can see the results. More than 16 million jobs created. When you think about more than 20 million small businesses started, people don't start small businesses unless they feel confident about the economy, and those two go hand in hand. And so, look, we're going to continue to do the work. Continue to make sure that we do everything possible in the last couple of days to deliver for the American people, and that's the president's focus. Let's not forget, when he walked in, there was a pandemic, once in a generation pandemic, and he turned that around. And so I'm gonna, the president's gonna address the American people later today, farewell address, and he'll certainly have a lot to say. Go ahead, Jojo.
Thanks, Karine. Yeah.
Last time I'll be able to say that.
I know. Thanks for taking questions these last couple of years.
Thank you.
Yeah, President-elect Trump, in a social media statement today, said the ceasefire deal could only have happened as a result of his election victory. What's your response to that assessment? Do you agree with that? Disagree?
Look, I think the president was asked some version of that question. I think that was the first question that he got after he spoke. And I said this, everyone's going to want to take credit. That's how these things work. But the fact of the matter is, in order for this deal to have been done, there needed to be a framework. The person who provided that framework was President Joe Biden. And we have been working on this for some time. It didn't just come together in the last couple of days. It didn't just start the last couple of days. And so, and not only that, he put together a framework. It got endorsed by the world. That's not an easy thing to do. And, you know, and so that's part of the first thing that he was able to do. The second thing that he was able to do was support Israel, and by supporting Israel, that badly weakened Hamas. You saw what happened to Hamas's leadership, and what we were able to do to the backers of Hamas. And so all of those things mattered. Our support and what we were able to do, how this president stepped in, matters. And now we are in a situation where we're going to pass this over to the incoming administration. A lot of this is going to be implemented by the incoming administration. That is why we worked very closely with the incoming administration. And again, that is what an American president makes.
And secondly, President Biden's going to be spending his final full day of his presidency in Charleston, South Carolina. Can you discuss what he's going to be doing there?
We'll have more to share on that, and I don't want to dive into that right now, but we'll certainly have more to share on what that will look like his last couple of days. Get Karen.
Just two quick ones. Does the president intend to leave a letter for President-elect Trump before he leaves office, as Trump did for him?
Well, I guess we'll see. We'll see. We'll see. I don't have anything. That's going to be up to the president. I don't have anything on that. But it's a good question. I'm curious, too.
And after Monday, what is the president's plan? What are he and the First Lady doing when they leave Washington on
And
Monday?
we'll have more to share on that as well.
Thank you for serving as press secretary and answering our questions for the last couple of years. A couple quick ones just to clarify some things, probably a yes or no. I know you have no readout of any calls between President Biden and President-elect Trump. Just declaratively, can you say, no, there has not been a call between them or in any of the last 2 weeks on this specific topic of Israel?
Look, I have not asked that question, so I don't want to get ahead of myself here. You always give me homework, Peter. Every time I come, you always tell me, can you come back and tell? Okay. 24/7, yeah. Go ahead.
If I can ask you briefly about tonight's address, if you can take us into that room.
Yeah.
Who is going to be in attendance? I trust the First Lady. Will family members be there? Who else will be there? And is there anything else surrounding it?
It's a very good question. We'll have more color for you later on in the evening. What I can say is the president is certainly very much looking forward to this moment, speaking directly to the American people. It's not every day you get to do an Oval Address. He gets to do another Oval Address, obviously his last one, in prime time. And so we will certainly have more color of who's going to be in the room and what that will look like as we get closer.
And then last question, I'll leave it to my colleagues, is it's tradition that at the end of the year the president would do a news conference in advance of departure. The president would take questions on a variety of different topics. What was the decision making? Why did this president decide not to do either of those before his departure?
I think the president, especially in the past couple of days, has been very much engaging with all of you, taking questions. He did it today. He himself wanted to stand up a moment to talk about the economy, but also take your questions just a couple of days ago. That is something that he wanted to do, and your colleagues let me finish. Your colleagues asked some really important questions that he was able to answer, an array of questions. And what I can say is I don't have anything to preview at this time, but certainly he's going to continue to engage with all of you. And, we have been, he's been very much involved in going back and forth with all of you in the past couple of days, and that is something that he wanted to make sure that he did that.
Were there any concerns about his public performance in a setting like that?
I think the issue that I have with that question, Peter, is that he literally did a press conference with all of you days ago with some of your colleagues and took multiple.
That's different, than an hour-long press conference. That's why I asked the question.
Look, but he took questions. He took questions on an array of issues, went back and forth, and he took questions today. He's been pretty consistent over the past couple of days in doing that. And that shows his performance, that those are questions that he doesn't know what you guys are going to ask, and he takes them and he answers them. And I think That is something that is important to him. This goes back to the freedom of the press, understanding how important you all are to our democracy, and understanding how having that continuation of a back and forth, even when we don't agree, is important. And so I'm pretty sure you all will continue to hear from him in the last couple of days of his administration, and he certainly looks forward to it.
Corinne, we're sort of dancing around who gets to take credit for this deal.
No one's dancing around here.
Colleague at the State Department briefed our colleagues that President Trump was critical in getting this deal over the line. Do you not agree with that statement?
I mean, look, I'm not going to speak to a random person. I don't know who this person is. I'm not going to. Oh. What I can say is, look, obviously Matt Miller will speak for himself. What I can say is there are steps that were taken here that is really important and critical, and that started with this president starting a framework that was agreed upon by the world back in May. And that was because of this president. That was because he was able to lay out his thoughts, his thinking on how to move forward with this negotiation. What I said before, this is someone who understands foreign policy as I'm talking about the president. He understands how difficult it is, and this was not an easy one. And so he has the experience. He was able to get that going, to get that started. So this has been going on for some time. It has. I mean, that's just the reality of it. That is just the facts of it. Have we been coordinating and working closely with the incoming Trump administration, their transition team? Yes. And we've been very forthcoming about that. But the fact of the matter is, it took someone who has the experience that this president had to get this going, to get this moving, to understand what negotiations look like. And that's what this president was able to bring to the table. And it got done under his watch. It got done today.
And then secondly, obviously this is a really big day on the foreign policy national security front. This is your last briefing, or the administration's last briefing. Is there a reason why John Kirby isn't here to take your questions?
So look, I just mentioned that Brett McGurk is going to be holding, and National Security Council is holding up a call. I think that's going to be really important. They will talk more about the implementation of this. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan was just here 2 days ago on Monday, and I think kind of laid out a really good framework for all of this, the thinking process, how this was going to move forward. And Brett McGurk, he is on the ground. He has all of the information. He has been there at the direction of this president, certainly with National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan leading that effort. And so he's going to have a lot more information than any of us here will have, because he's been on the ground, understanding, working with the negotiators and understanding how this process has worked. So that's how this works. Go ahead.
You said that you wish your successor luck. Have you had any extensive conversations with her about how this job is done?
I haven't. But I'm not the only White House press secretary or soon-to-be former White House press secretary out there. So I'm sure there are many people for her to connect with and speak with. But I have not had a conversation with her.
Thanks, Corinne. How many Americans are going to be in the first tranche, and when will they start coming out?
It's a good question. That's why Brett McGurk is going to be holding this National Security Council call. He will have all of that information. The president even said the same thing when he was asked a similar question, that we will have more details to share. And so the National Security Council, Brett McGurk, will share that with all of you, hopefully momentarily, once this is done.
I'm confused on why we're having the last briefing of the administration on what's been one of the defining wars of this presidency without being able to answer those questions.
I just said he's going to hold a press call, and he'll take your questions on that. Okay. I think that's important to hear directly from the person who's on the ground. I think that's an important thing to do.
Okay.
Right?
We were under the impression that there were folks here in the building who had those answers, who could tell us.
National Security Council is holding up a call so that Brett McGurk can get on that call and take your questions.
Okay. Why is it that you seem unwilling to extend any credit to Trump for this deal? Couldn't he just have said, hold off until I'm in office?
What I will say is that what we know to be true, what we know this process, how it has moved over the past 8 months. This is a deal that happened under the framework that this president put forward and was endorsed by the world. And this is also an administration that has had certainly the support, the back of Israel that helped denigrate Hamas, their military severely, weaken them. And we created, because of also doing that, we created the conditions for this deal. That is what has happened over the last 8 months. And we have talked closely, worked closely, coordinated closely with the incoming administration, and that is how we've been able to get to this point. And the reason we were able to do that, having that conversation with the transition team, is because this president believed in the importance of having a peaceful transfer of power, right? Of having a transition that worked for the American people and had the American people at the forefront in trying to make sure that we got this done.
We've heard variations of that answer through the briefing, but I guess more plainly, I'm wondering, if you'll just say your view, which seems to be that Trump gets no credit.
I've shared my view. I don't have anything else to share. I've shared how we got to this point. The president shared that moments ago. He laid out in very succinct way on how we got to this point. I've talked about Brett McGurk, who's on the ground talking to negotiators, has been there working at the direction of this president, the leadership, obviously, of the National Security Advisor. This has been something that has been in the works for months, way before November. That is just how this has worked. I'm not here to talk about the transition. I'm not here to talk about who gets credit, not get credit. I'm here to talk about what this president has been able to do. And here's what is also incredibly important here. We're going to get hostages who are going to go home to their family. After 15 months of, I don't even want to think the horror that they have gone through. I can't even imagine it. And I think that matters. I mean, we're going back and forth about credit, but people are going to go home to their families. And that is so important. And hopefully the phases will continue and we'll get to an end of war here. And that is important. And let's not forget, increase that humanitarian aid into Gaza, because there are people there who need that aid and the assistance. I'm going to move on. Go ahead. No, I'm going to wait. No,
How will you grade yourself on your goal of being the most transparent administration?
Go ahead. I've taken like 3 questions. I'm going to move on. Go ahead.
No answer there?
Oh, go ahead. I've already taken 3 of your questions. I'm going to make sure some of your colleagues get an opportunity as well.
Could you respond to the report released by the special counsel who prosecuted Hunter Biden? Specifically, he talked about Biden's claims that his son was unfairly targeted and said the president's characterizations are incorrect based on the facts in this case, and on a more fundamental level, they are wrong. He also said that politicians who attack the decisions of career prosecutors as politically motivated when they disagree with the outcome of a case undermine the public's confidence in our criminal justice system.
So, I mean, a couple things there. Let's not forget why the president came to his conclusion, how he got to this point of pardoning his son. And he talked about the circumstances of this prosecution and how out of norm they were. And let's not forget there were legal experts that agreed with this president, who shared that conclusion of this president. And one of those experts is a former prosecutor, as you all know, Attorney General Eric Holder, and he was very clear. I just want to quote him. No U.S. attorney would have charged this case given the underlying facts. Had his name been Joe Smith, the resolution would have been fundamentally and more fairly a declination. Pardon warranted. And if you look at what happened here, and you look at paying your taxes, the vast majority of people who don't pay their taxes on time are not charged with criminal penalties. They're just not. They pay their penalties and fees, and that's what Hunter Biden did. And so the president wasn't alone in this, in making that, when he made that determination, he had legal experts who also agreed with how he, making this decision on pardoning his son, Hunter Biden.
No concern that he undermines the public perception of the justice system.
I just answered that question. I don't have anything else for you. Okay, go ahead.
Thanks. I know that you said you don't have details on what the president will be doing on Sunday, but can you expound on why he chose to spend, his last day in office in South Carolina?
We'll have more to share. I don't want to get ahead of that. We'll have more to share. And why South Carolina?
Last thing, has the president spoke with Prime Minister Netanyahu, or does he plan to do so in the coming days?
Well, as you know, he recently just spoke to the Prime Minister, and if we have more calls to read out, we certainly will do that. I know I have to start wrapping up. Go ahead.
Thank you so much, Karine. On Monday, President Biden said he was more optimistic than ever about the future. Isn't he afraid or concerned that part of his legacy could be or is about to be erased by the incoming president?
I mean, look, when I answered this question about, I think it was a polling question from Kayla, I also talked about, in my answering that question, how popular some of the things that the president has done. CHIPS and Science Act, bipartisan infrastructure legislation, the PACT Act, and even the provisions of the Inflation Reduction Act. And I talked about the insulin being the insulin at $35 a month for seniors. Those are things, all of those things that I just laid out are popular with the American people. And that is something that the incoming administration has to think about, Republicans on the other side of Pennsylvania has to think about. These are things that are incredibly popular. Some of them, bipartisan infrastructure legislation, CHIPS and Science Act, the PACT Act, were done in a bipartisan way. And so to undo those successes, some of the things, again, popular with the American people, that's something that they have to seriously think about. And what we have done in those historic pieces of legislation that obviously is now law will have lasting effects on people's lives, lasting effect. So he's very confident about that.
And one about foreign policy, because President Biden said he